Alright team, how are you all doing? Welcome to day number 4 of my CrossFit workouts for beginners program. If you haven't checked out the first episode, you need to go back to the beginning, check out this YouTube card up here, and all 3 episodes will be linked in the YouTube description. Now in these episodes I've talked about benchmark workouts, non-equipment workouts so you can try CrossFit at home, and I've talked about the one main skill you need to try and master to be able to be good at CrossFit movements. But now I'm going to talk about the importance of building up strict strength and muscular size. In CrossFit, think about a lot of the movements that are included within workouts. Things like the snatch, the clean and jerk, the power clean, kipping pull-ups, kipping handstand push-ups, muscle-ups. There are probably other things that link all these exercises, but one thing that stands out for me is that they're all very explosive movements. For example, with the snatch, it's quite hard to practice it slowly because either you perform the full snatch or you don't. You can't really do it slowly with a heavy weight. You can practice it slowly with something like a PVC pipe. But when you're adding weight to it, it's quite hard to do it slowly. It's explosive. Sticking with the snatch, as you perform it, a lot of the power is generated from the legs, the glutes, the quads, the hamstrings, and as the bar reaches your hips, a lot of the explosiveness comes from your hips, and then you're catching it in an overhead position. That overhead position requires a lot of mobility, and then you're having to use shoulder strength to be able to hold that bar over your head. So to perform the snatch, you need power, you need strength, you need muscular size to be able to protect all the joints, like at the shoulder joint when you're holding the bar over your head, and you also need mobility. So what I recommend you guys do is set up a really good, consistent strength and size program with a little bit of CrossFit and mobility intertwined with that. So personally, as a coach, anybody I work with, I'd rather do the amount of frequency of training that they know they can master to start with. So that might be 3 times a week. But eventually, I like to build up somebody to doing shorter sessions, but more frequently rather than longer sessions, and less frequency during the week. So say a 1 hour and a half session 3 times a week. I prefer doing, say, a 45-minute session 6 times a week. Or 5 times depending on the person's schedule. When you're setting up a program though, I'd recommend that you start off with a compound movement, then 1 or 2, I'd go for 2 isolation movements, practicing a CrossFit skill, and then some mobility. So a compound movement, that means multiple muscle groups are required to complete the movement. So for the barbell back squat, you need to use the glutes, the hamstrings, the quads, and the calves to be able to perform the movement. If we're talking about an overhead press, you need to be able to use your anterior deltoids, your chest, your pectoral muscles, your rear delts. A lot of muscles are required to be able to perform this movement. Start off something very simple, either 5 sets of 5, focusing on using a heavier weight, but if we're learning the movement, going a little bit lighter is fine to start with. 3 sets of 10, and you can alternate between 5 sets of 5, 3 sets of 10, week by week, and then just try and slowly apply progressive overload week by week, and that just means using more weight each time you do a session. So 5 by 5, so with overhead press, you might use 40 kilos, and then 3 by 10 you might use 30 kilos the next week. Then the week after that you might try 42.5 kilos for the 5 sets of 5, and so on. Then after the compound movement, the isolation movements are really focusing on mind to muscle connection. So if we're talking about arms, for example, that could be a barbell bicep curl in the second isolation movement, could be a tricep skull crusher or push down. So what you're focusing on doing is making sure you move the weight or the load with the muscle groups that you're trying to target. So rather than any swinging, you might have to use a little bit of swing, which is fine, but you're focusing for a barbell curl on using your biceps, maybe a little bit of your front deltoids to be able to perform the movement. And focusing on high repetitions, anywhere between 8 and 15, and again focus on progressive overload. Building up the muscle tissue around the joints over time is going to protect you, it's going to build up the strength in your ligaments and tendons, and it's just very good to have all this muscle tissue around the joints of the knee, around the joints of the elbow, when you eventually come to include more explosive CrossFit movements in your training. Then after the 1 or 2 isolation movements, practicing a CrossFit skill I definitely recommend, but you may have to do some of the most basic drills. So when I say practicing CrossFit movements, this could be pistol squats, double unders, handstand push-ups. For handstand push-ups, you might only be able to do an incline push-up to start with, which is absolutely fine. Just spend 10 minutes focusing on improving technique and doing some sets as well to see if you can try and build up the strength in your shoulders. So for pipe push-ups, doing some handstand holds, absolutely fine for handstand push-ups. Double unders, you may just spend 10 minutes trying to string one double under together. Doing a good 10 minutes at the end of every workout, if we're talking about short duration workouts, high frequency each week, is really good just to get practicing the skills. Then finally, to end off each session, I'd recommend picking 2 or 3 mobility exercises to help start getting looser in the shoulder joint. So for example, you might hold a PVC pipe, straight arm over your head, and hold it in that overhead position slightly further back. You feel the stretch in your pectorals and the anterior deltoid. Holding that for 1.5 minutes, and then trying some other shoulder mobility movements for 1.5 minutes. Literally pick 2 or 3 different exercises, focus on one area of the body, because then the day after you could focus on, say, the hips and mobility at the hips, pick 2 or 3 exercises for that. And just doing that every day, week by week, you're going to see improvements in your mobility, and it'll be easier for you to sit at the bottom of a squat or be in that overhead position with a weight above your head. If you have any questions about this, then please do let me know in the YouTube comments section. Let me know what you want to see in the future. But just remember, compound movement, 1 or 2 isolation movements, then a mobility movement at the end, and also practicing a CrossFit skill. Thanks again for watching. I look forward to seeing you guys in my next video.